They cast her off like dead weight, leaving her to walk alone beneath the burning sun, dusty, hungry, and unwanted. But now she rides shotgun in a fine carriage beside the richest man in town, proof that sometimes the one they left behind ends up leading the way. The storm hits the wagon train like God's own fury, turning the Wyoming Trail into a river of mud and misery. Lightning splits the sky as families huddle under soaked canvas, their dreams of California growing dimmer with each thunderclap. But for Seraphine Vale, curled up in the back of the Morrison wagon, this storm isn't just washing away hope, it's about to wash away her life. She's burning up with fever again. "Mrs.?" Morrison whispers to her husband, loud enough for half the train to hear. "Been 3 days now, and she ain't getting better. We can't keep carrying dead weight." Seraphine tries to speak, to tell them she'll recover, that she just needs time. But her voice comes out as nothing more than a rasp, her body racked with chills despite the fever coursing through her veins. She's been sick since they crossed the Platte River, and every day she's grown weaker, while the whispers have grown louder. "The woman's a burden," declares wagon master Jake Holloway, his voice cutting through the rain like a blade. "We got families to think about, children who need those supplies she's eating. Can't risk the whole train for one sickly woman with no kin. The vote, when it comes, isn't even close. 18 families against one dying woman, the mathematics of survival on the frontier, where compassion is a luxury most can't afford." They don't even wait for the storm to pass. Within an hour, Seraphine finds herself dumped beside the muddy trail like a broken piece of furniture, her few possessions scattered around her in the driving rain. "Please," she whispers, as the wagons roll past. But her voice is lost in the wind. Children peer out from under canvas covers, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Some adults won't even look at her. Guilt is harder to carry than supplies, and they've already got enough weight to bear. As the last wagon disappears into the storm, Seraphine collapses onto the muddy ground. The cold seeps through her worn dress, and she can feel her strength ebbing away like water through a broken dam. This is how it ends, she thinks. Not in California with a new life, but on a nameless trail in the middle of nowhere, forgotten before she's even dead. But the trail held more than just death, it held fate. Through the rain and thunder, Seraphine hears something impossible, the sound of hoofbeats approaching, steady and deliberate despite the storm. A single rider emerges from the darkness, leading a covered wagon that looks nothing like the crude prairie schooners she's grown accustomed to. This one is built for comfort, not just survival. If stories of survival and redemption move you, drop a comment below. We want to hear what you think about second chances and the power of one person's kindness to change everything. Seraphine wakes to the gentle swaying of a moving wagon, her body wrapped in blankets softer than anything she's felt in months. The canvas above her head is pristine white, not the patched and stained covers she remembers from the Morrison wagon. For a moment, she wonders if she's died, and this is some kind of strange afterlife. "Easy now," says a voice quiet and refined. "You're safe." She turns her head to see a man sitting across from her, and her breath catches despite her weakness. He's perhaps 40, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes the color of storm cloud. His clothes are well-tailored but practical, expensive without being flashy. Everything about him speaks of wealth, but also of a man who's earned it rather than inherited it. "Who are you?" Seraphine whispers, her voice still raw from fever. "Callum Thorne," he replies, offering her a tin cup filled with cool water. "Found you on the trail during the storm. Figured leaving you there wasn't much of an option." Seraphine drinks gratefully, the water soothing her parched throat. "The wagon train. They left me. Said I was a burden." The words taste bitter, but they're the truth. Callum's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in those gray eyes, understanding, maybe, or recognition. "People do what they think they have to do to survive," he says simply. "Doesn't make it right." As her strength slowly returns, Seraphine studies her unexpected savior. He moves with quiet efficiency, checking supplies and adjusting their course without wasted motion. There's something almost military in his bearing, a sense of command that comes naturally to men who've learned to make hard decisions. "Where are we going?" she asks. "Cedar Falls," Callum replies. "Town about 2 days south of here. I have business there. And then, he's quiet for a long moment, focusing on the reins in his hands. Then we figure out what comes next. The wagon is unlike anything Seraphine has experienced. The seats are cushioned, the interior organized with the precision of someone who values order and efficiency. She notices a rifle secured within easy reach, and a strongbox bolted to the wagon floor details that suggest this man is more than just a successful merchant. As they travel, Callum maintains a respectful distance, never crowding her or making her feel trapped. He shares his food without comment, adjusts her blankets when she shivers, and asks nothing in return. It's a kindness so unexpected after her recent abandonment that it almost brings tears to her eyes. "Why did you help me?" Seraphine finally asks as the sun begins to set. Callum considers the question for a long time, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Sometimes a person finds themselves in a position to do right by someone who's been wronged, he says eventually. Seemed like one of those times. But even safety comes with its own shadows. As they make camp that first night, Seraphine notices how Callum positions their fire hidden from the main trail, easily defensible. And when he thinks she's asleep, she sees him check his weapons with the practiced ease of a man who's had to use them before. Cedar Falls sprawls across the valley like a promise of prosperity, its buildings newer and better maintained than the ramshackle frontier towns Seraphine has grown accustomed to. The main street is wide and well-planned, lined with establishments that speak of serious money, a proper bank, a hotel with glass windows, and a freight office bearing the name Thorne and Associates in gold lettering. "You own all this?" Seraphine asks as they roll down Main Street, drawing stares from pedestrians who clearly recognize the wagon and its owner. "Not all of it," Callum replies with what might be amusement, "just the parts that matter." The people of Cedar Falls treat Callum Thorne with a mixture of respect and wariness that Seraphine finds fascinating. Men tip their hats and step aside as his wagon passes, but there's something cautious in their deference, the kind of careful politeness reserved for predators who happen to be on your side. At Henley's General Store, the proprietor practically falls over himself to assist with their supplies. "Mr. Thorne, sir, didn't expect to see you back so soon. How did the Denver run go?" "Profitable," Callum says simply, his tone discouraging further questions. "Mrs. Sarah, this is Miss Vale. She'll be staying at the hotel for a while." Mrs. Henley's eyes widen with curiosity, but she's too smart to ask direct questions. Instead, she bustles around gathering supplies while stealing glances at Seraphine, clearly trying to piece together the story of how a woman in rough traveling clothes came to arrive with the town's most powerful man. As they walk to the hotel, Seraphine begins to understand the scope of Callum's influence. His freight company controls trade routes throughout the territory. His investments span everything from mining to cattle, and his word carries weight that goes far beyond simple wealth. This is a man who shapes the destiny of entire communities. The hotel room he secures for her is the finest she's ever seen: clean sheets, a real bathtub, and a window overlooking the bustling street below. When Seraphine tries to thank him, Callum waves off her gratitude with obvious discomfort. "Get some rest," he says. "We'll talk tomorrow about what you'd like to do next." But as he turns to leave, Seraphine catches a glimpse of something unexpected in his expression, a shadow of old pain, quickly hidden, but unmistakably there. Whatever drove Callum Thorne to build his empire, whatever keeps him moving from town to town with military precision, it isn't just ambition. That evening, over dinner in the hotel dining room, Seraphine learns more about her benefactor from the careful conversations of other guests. He's ruthless in business, they say, but scrupulously fair. He's broken companies that tried to cheat him, but he's also rebuilt entire towns devastated by drought or disaster. People respect him because he delivers on his promises, but they fear him because those promises sometimes come with prices that aren't immediately apparent. "Man's got ghosts," whispers the desk clerk to a traveling salesman. "Lost someone important years back, they say. That's why he keeps moving, never settles anywhere for long." The truth behind his kindness was more complex than charity, and Seraphine was beginning to understand that her rescue might be part of a larger story, one written in old wounds and unfinished business. 3 days of rest and decent food work miracles for Seraphine's health, but they do nothing to quiet the restlessness growing in her chest. She spent her recovery watching Cedar Falls from her hotel window, studying the rhythm of commerce that flows through its streets like lifeblood. And at the center of it all moves Callum Thorne, orchestrating, deciding, building something that will outlast him. When he arrives for their promised conversation, Seraphine doesn't give him time to settle into politeness. "I want to work," she announces, rising from her chair with newfound strength. "I won't be a charity case, Mr. Thorne. I've got skills and I intend to use them." Callum studies her with those storm-gray eyes, and for the first time since her rescue, Seraphine sees genuine surprise in his expression. "Miss Vale, you nearly died a week ago. Perhaps you should focus on recovering before." "I can read, write, and cipher better than most men," Seraphine interrupts, her voice gaining force. "I kept books for my father's business back in Missouri before everything went to hell. I know freight manifests, shipping costs, and profit margins. Don't treat me like some delicate flower who needs protecting." The silence that follows is charged with possibility. Callum leans back in his chair, reassessing the woman before him with the same intensity he might apply to a complex business deal. "My bookkeeper, Mr. Patterson, has been struggling to keep up with the expansion," he says slowly. "The Denver route alone generates enough paperwork to bury a man. If you're serious about this—" "I'm serious about everything, Mr. Thorne. Dead serious." What starts as a trial position becomes something neither of them expected. Seraphine attacks the ledgers with the hunger of someone who's been starving for purpose, organizing accounts with a precision that impresses even Callum's experienced staff. She spots discrepancies Patterson missed, suggests routing efficiencies that save both time and money, and demonstrates an intuitive understanding of the freight business that takes most people years to develop. "Where did you learn this?" Callum asks one evening, finding her still working by lamplight in the freight office. "Necessity," Seraphine replies without looking up from her calculations. "When your family's business is failing and your father's drinking away the profits, you either learn to manage the books or you starve. I chose not to starve." Callum finds himself staying later each day, drawn by conversations that challenge his thinking and reveal depths to Seraphine's character he hadn't suspected. She's not just intelligent, she's strategic, seeing patterns and possibilities that others miss. More importantly, she's not intimidated by his reputation or his wealth. She treats him like a man, not a legend. "You've increased our efficiency by almost 20% in 2 weeks," he tells her one Friday evening as they review the week's receipts. "Patterson's been doing this job for 5 years. "Patterson's a fine man," Seraphine says diplomatically, "but he thinks like someone who's never been hungry. I think like someone who knows what it costs when things go wrong." As autumn deepens into winter, Seraphine establishes herself as an indispensable part of Thorne and Associates. The other employees, initially skeptical of the woman their boss pulled from a muddy trail, begin seeking her advice on complex shipments and difficult accounts. She earns respect through competence, and respect, Seraphine has learned, is harder currency than gold. The months pass quietly, with Seraphine building both her skills and her reputation in Cedar Falls. By spring, she's become a fixture in the community, not universally loved, but undeniably respected. Her sharp mind and sharper tongue have made her valuable allies and a few enemies, but she's learned to navigate both with equal skill. But someone else had been watching her rise with growing jealousy and not with kindness. As Seraphine's influence grows and her relationship with Callum deepens from professional to personal, envious eyes begin planning ways to tear down what she's building. The invitation arrives on expensive paper, delivered by a young boy who waits expectantly for a response. Mrs. Victoria Ashford requests the pleasure of Miss Seraphine Vale's company at her autumn social. This Saturday evening at 7 o'clock, in Grote. It's signed with elaborate flourishes that speak of old money and older pretensions. Seraphine stares at the invitation, understanding its significance. This isn't just a party, it's a test. Mrs. Ashford is Cedar Falls' self-appointed arbiter of social standing, and her gatherings determine who belongs in polite society and who remains forever on the outside. You don't have to go, Callum says when she shows him the invitation. Victoria Ashford's opinions don't matter to anyone whose opinion actually counts. They matter to your business, Seraphine replies, studying his carefully neutral expression. And they matter to me. I won't hide in shadows, Callum. If I'm going to live in this town, I'm going to do it with my head held high. What follows is a transformation that amazes even Seraphine herself. Mrs. Chen, the town's most skilled seamstress, creates a dress of deep blue silk that complements Seraphine's dark hair and brings out the green in her eyes. The hotel's housekeeper, won over by Seraphine's unfailing courtesy, helps arrange her hair in an elegant style that would do credit to any lady in Denver or San Francisco. When Seraphine descends the hotel stairs that Saturday evening, the entire lobby falls silent. The woman who arrived in Cedar Falls wearing the rough clothes of a frontier traveler has been replaced by someone who could grace the finest parlors in the East. But it's not just the clothes, it's the confidence, the bearing of someone who's earned her place through merit rather than birthright. Callum, waiting at the bottom of the stairs in his finest evening wear, offers his arm with genuine admiration. Miss Vale, he says formally, though his eyes hold warmth reserved for much more intimate address, you look magnificent. The Ashford mansion sits on the hill, overlooking Cedar Falls like a monument to respectability, its windows blazing with light and its rooms filled with the town's most prominent citizens. As Callum and Seraphine enter the main parlor, conversations pause and heads turn with the precision of choreographed theater. Well, declares Mrs. Ashford, sailing across the room in a rustle of black taffeta and barely concealed curiosity. Mr. Thorne, how lovely to see you. And this must be the young woman everyone's been discussing. The emphasis on discussing carries enough weight to sink a freight wagon, but Seraphine meets Mrs. Ashford's calculating gaze with serene composure. Mrs. Ashford, thank you for your kind invitation. Your home is even more beautiful than everyone says. What follows is a delicate dance of social warfare, fought with smile and innuendo rather than bullets and blades. Seraphine navigates conversations about family background and social connections with diplomatic skill, revealing just enough truth to satisfy curiosity while maintaining her dignity. But not everyone at the party has come to welcome Cedar Falls' newest resident. Near the refreshment table, Vivienne Kestrel holds court with a group of ladies whose expressions grow more scandalized with each whispered revelation. I have it on good authority, Vivienne announces in a voice pitched to Carrie, that our mysterious Miss Vale was discovered on the trail, in rather compromising circumstances, abandoned by decent people for reasons that become clearer by the day. The words hit Seraphine like physical blows, but she forces herself to maintain her composure even as her cheeks burn with humiliation. Around the room, she can see the damage spreading, raised eyebrows, meaningful glances, the subtle shift that turns a social gathering into a social execution. What happened next would drag old pain into dangerous light and transform a woman's quiet triumph into a very public battle for survival. The poison Vivienne Kestrel spreads through the Ashford parlor works with devastating efficiency. By Monday morning, half of Cedar Falls believes they know Seraphine's true story, that she was cast out from the wagon train for moral failings, that Callum Thorne rescued her for purposes that decent people don't discuss, and that her rapid rise in his business affairs involves services beyond bookkeeping. Seraphine feels the change immediately. Shopkeepers who had grown friendly now serve her with cool politeness. Women who had begun nodding to her on the street suddenly find urgent business that requires looking away. Even at the freight office, she catches some of the men exchanging glances that make her skin crawl. Pay them no mind, advises Mrs. Chen when Seraphine stops by to thank her for the dress. Small people make themselves feel bigger by cutting others down to size. You know who you are, that's what matters. But Seraphine's hard-won confidence crumbles further when a familiar figure steps off the Wednesday stagecoach. Thomas Henley, no relation to the store owner, is a thin, bitter man with eyes like chips of flint and a mouth that seems permanently twisted into a sneer. He was part of the Morrison wagon train, one of the loudest voices calling for her abandonment. Well, I'll be damned. Henley announces to the gathered crowd at the depot, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's witnessed scandal firsthand. "If it ain't the sickly woman from the trail. Heard you'd landed on your feet real quick like." The implication in his tone makes Seraphine's stomach turn, but she forces herself to stand straight. "Mr. Henley, I trust your journey to California proved more successful than you anticipated." "Oh, we made it just fine," Henley replies, circling her like a vulture sensing weakness. "Course, we had to travel light after certain burdens were removed. Funny how some folks who claim to be dying manage to recover so quick when the right incentives present themselves." A crowd begins gathering, drawn by the promise of fresh scandal. Henley, clearly enjoying his moment of importance, launches into a version of events that paints Seraphine as a manipulative woman who feigned illness to trick sympathetic men into supporting her. "Saw her myself, carrying on with at least 3 different men during the journey. He lies smoothly. Always claimed to be too sick to work, but never too sick for other activities, if you catch my meaning." Wagon Master finally had enough and told her to find another way to California. The crowd murmurs with shocked excitement, and Seraphine feels the walls of her new life collapsing around her. She opens her mouth to defend herself, but what can she say? That she was genuinely ill? That she's worked harder in the past months than most people work in a year? That she's built her position through competence, not through the sordid means Henley implies? That's when Callum Thorne steps through the crowd, his presence immediately changing the dynamics of the confrontation. He moves with the quiet authority of a man who's accustomed to being obeyed, and when he speaks, his voice carries a chill that makes even Henley step back. "Mr. Henley, isn't it?" Callum says, his tone conversational but somehow threatening. "I believe you're misinformed about Miss Vale's circumstances. Perhaps you should reconsider spreading stories that might prove problematic for you." Henley's bluster falters slightly, but he's gone too far to back down now. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Thorne?" Because a man has the right to speak the truth about what he's witnessed. A man also has the responsibility to ensure his truth is actually accurate. Callum replies, "I'd hate for you to discover that bearing false witness carries consequences you hadn't anticipated." The confrontation ends without violence, but the damage is done. As the crowd disperses, Seraphine sees the combination of pity and judgment in their eyes. By evening, she's vanished from Cedar Falls like smoke in the wind, leaving behind only a note that Callum doesn't find until morning. "Thank you for everything. Don't let my presence destroy what you've built." Callum may be rich, but she had something he didn't, nothing left to lose. Callum reads Seraphine's farewell note 3 times before the full impact hits him. She's gone vanished in the night, like a fugitive fleeing justice, when all she'd done was dare to rebuild a life that others had tried to destroy. The careful composure he's maintained for years cracks, revealing depths of anger that surprise even him. "Search every road out of town," he orders his foreman, Jake Mitchell. "Check the stage stops, the trading posts, anywhere she might have gone for shelter. And do it quietly. I don't want her feeling hunted." But as the hours stretch into days with no sign of Seraphine, Callum realizes she's not just running from Cedar Falls, she's running from him, from the connection that had grown between them, from the possibility of happiness that Thomas Henley's lies had poisoned. He rides out himself, following the main trail toward Denver, then doubling back to check the smaller routes that a woman traveling alone might choose for safety. Each empty mile brings a deeper understanding of what Seraphine means to him and why her absence feels like a wound that won't heal. The search forces Callum to confront memories he's spent years trying to bury. His sister Catherine had been 22 when the cholera hit their Missouri town, working as a schoolteacher, and engaged to a young lawyer who promised to love her forever. But when she fell ill, when the fever broke her mind temporarily and left her raving in delirium, that same lawyer spread whispers about her moral corruption and unnatural behavior. Catherine had recovered her sanity, but not her reputation. The engagement was broken, her teaching position lost, and the family she devoted her life to educating turned their backs without hesitation. She died 3 months later, not from cholera, but from a broken heart and the opium she'd taken to numb the pain of social exile. "I should have fought for her," Callum tells his horse as they pause beside a stream on the third day of searching. Should have used every resource I had to destroy the bastards who destroyed her. But I was young and believed that justice would prevail, that good people would see the truth eventually. He'd learned better since then, building his fortune with the methodical precision of a man who never again intended to be helpless in the face of cruelty. But all his wealth and influence meant nothing if he couldn't protect the people who mattered to him, first Catherine, now Seraphine. On the fourth day, word reaches him through his network of contacts. A woman matching Seraphine's description had been seen at a mining camp 30 miles north, but she wasn't seeking shelter or assistance. She was applying for work as a security guard, demonstrating shooting skills that impressed even hardened prospectors. Said she could handle herself in a fight, reports the messenger, a grizzled trader who knew better than to ask too many questions. Boss man hired her on the spot after she put 6 shots through a playing card at 50 paces. Woman's got steady hands and cold eyes reminded me of someone who's got nothing left to lose. Callum immediately saddles his best horse and sets out for the Copper Creek mining camp, driven by an urgency he can't fully explain. The trail is treacherous, winding through mountain passes where one wrong step could mean death, but he pushes forward with the determination of a man who's finally found something worth fighting for. But Seraphine wasn't waiting to be saved. She was forging her own path, building a new identity in the dangerous world of frontier mining camps, where reputation mattered less than ability, and questions about the past were considered impolite. The Copper Creek mining camp sprawls across the mountainside like a cancer, all mud and canvas, and desperate men seeking quick fortunes. Seraphine, who now goes by Sarah Vale, has been working as a guard for 2 weeks, long enough to establish her reputation but not long enough to feel truly secure. Riders coming in hard from the south, calls Pete Garrison, the camp foreman. Looks like the Morrison gang. They've been hitting camps all month. The Morrison gang, 6 desperate men led by Jake Morrison, who believes the only good witness is a dead one. They've been terrorizing mining operations throughout the territory, leaving a trail of bodies and empty strongboxes. How many? Seraphine asks, checking her ammunition. 6 that I can see, Pete replies. Maybe more hanging back. You sure you want to be here for this? Seraphine's answer comes in the form of her first shot, a clean hit that drops the lead rider before they can react. Her second shot takes down a horse, sending its rider tumbling into the rocky ground. The gunfight is brief but decisive. Seraphine moves with deadly precision, her shots finding targets, while the gang's return fire goes wide. She uses the camp's layout to her advantage, forcing the outlaws into positions where they can't use their superior numbers effectively. The battle ends with 4 gang members dead and 2 captured. Jake Morrison himself lies bleeding in the dirt, his reputation shattered by a woman he'd underestimated. Jesus Christ, whispers one of the miners. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? Necessity, Seraphine replies, ejecting spent shells with steady hands. When the world decides you're expendable, you either learn to fight back or you die. That's when hoofbeats announce another arrival, a single rider from Cedar Falls. Even before she can see his face, Seraphine recognizes Callum Thorne's bearing. He dismounts slowly, taking in the scattered bodies and smoking ruins of what had been planned as a massacre. When his gaze settles on Seraphine, standing among the carnage with her rifle, his expression shows admiration rather than shock. Miss Vale, I presume? He says with a slight smile. I heard there was a woman riding shotgun who foiled a robbery. Didn't realize she was also single-handedly ending the Morrison gang's career. What do you want, Callum? Seraphine asks. To make you an offer, he replies, stepping closer. And to tell you that Thomas Henley was arrested yesterday for fraud in Denver? Seems his stories were part of a larger pattern of extortion. Amazing what a thorough investigation can uncover. The ride back to Cedar Falls takes 2 days, and during that time, Callum and Seraphine finally speak the truths they've been dancing around for months. They camp beneath stars that seem close enough to touch, sharing a fire that illuminates more than just their faces. I spent 8 years building an empire, Callum says, staring into the flames. Told myself it was about security, about never being helpless again. But really, I think I was just trying to build walls high enough that grief couldn't climb them. Seraphine understands. After my family lost everything, after the wagon train, I learned that the world sees women like me as disposable. Fighting back was the only choice I had left. They talk about Catherine, Callum's sister, and the cruel mathematics of social destruction that had killed her. They discuss the Morrison wagon train, and how desperation can turn decent people into something unrecognizable. Most importantly, they acknowledge the connection that has grown between them, built on mutual respect and shared understanding. I can't offer you safety, Callum says as dawn approaches. My business makes enemies, and my past makes me a target. If you stay with me, you'll never have the quiet life most women want. Seraphine laughs, the sound carrying both humor and steel. Callum, I've been shot at by outlaws, abandoned by my own family, and condemned by an entire town based on lies. Quiet was never really an option for me anyway. His proposal isn't the romantic gesture of novels. It's a business partnership, a joining of forces between two people who've learned that survival requires both strength and strategy. But underneath the practical language lies something deeper: love built on understanding rather than illusion. I'm asking you to be my partner in everything: business, life, the future we'll build together. Equal voices, equal say, equal risk. And equal rewards? Seraphine asks with a smile that transforms her face. Especially those. They return to Cedar Falls as partners, riding side by side in a carriage that announces their new status. The town buzzes with speculation, some supportive, some scandalized, all fascinated by the transformation of the woman they'd tried to destroy. Mrs. Ashford hosts another gathering, nominally to welcome the engaged couple, but really to satisfy her curiosity. Seraphine moves through the crowd with quiet confidence, her hand resting on Callum's arm, but her spine straight with her own strength. You've certainly surprised us all, Miss Vale, Mrs. Ashford says carefully, though I suppose it's Mrs. Thorne now? Not yet, Seraphine replies with gentle firmness. But soon, and I hope you'll continue to be surprised, Mrs. Ashford. I have so many plans for Cedar Falls. 6 months later, as spring breathes life back into the Wyoming territory, Seraphine and Callum receive word that sets the final piece of their story in motion. The Morrison wagon train, the same group that had abandoned her to die on a muddy trail, is stranded 50 miles east of Cedar Falls, desperate for supplies and guidance. We don't owe them anything, Callum points out over breakfast. They made their choice when they left you behind. Yes, they did, Seraphine agrees. But now I'm in a position to choose again, revenge or redemption. They arrive at the stranded camp in a carriage built like royalty, followed by a supply wagon train of their own. The Morrison group has been reduced to barely half its original size, ravaged by disease and frontier hardships. Survivors huddle around inadequate fires, their faces gaunt with hunger and despair. Sam Holloway, the former wagon master who orchestrated Seraphine's abandonment, emerges from his tent looking aged beyond his years. When he sees Seraphine step down from the carriage, his face goes white. You, he whispers, but you were. We thought you'd died? Seraphine finishes, her voice carrying clearly across the camp. Yes, I imagine you did. It would have been more convenient for everyone. Word spreads like wildfire. The woman they'd left to die has returned, transformed into someone who commands respect and resources beyond their imagination. Families emerge, staring at the elegant figure who bears little resemblance to the fever-racked woman they remember. Mrs. Morrison approaches with tears streaming down her cheeks. Miss Vale, Mrs. Thorne, we were so afraid, so desperate. You were human, Seraphine replies without anger. Frightened people make choices they wouldn't make otherwise. Callum steps forward, commanding attention from the desperate survivors. We've brought medical supplies, food for a month, and guides. But there are conditions: you'll repay the cost once established in California, and carry letters telling what really happened to the woman you abandoned. One woman, younger and pregnant, steps forward with trembling hands. It's Mary Morrison, the same woman who had argued most vocally for Seraphine's abandonment. Ain't you that girl we left behind? Mary asks, her voice thick with shame, hand protecting her swollen belly. Seraphine looks at her, seeing not an enemy but another woman struggling to survive. The irony isn't lost. This woman who once declared her unworthy now stands desperate and vulnerable, carrying new life that depends entirely on mercy. Yes, Seraphine says softly, her words carrying across the silent camp like a benediction, and I'm the reason you're still alive. The transformation is immediate. Families emerge with gratitude and awe. Children who once feared her now look with wonder reserved for heroes. As sunset paints the sky gold and crimson, Seraphine stands beside Callum, watching renewed hope. Families share their first decent meal in weeks. Sick children receive medical attention, and tomorrow they'll resume their journey with proper guidance. Any regrets? Callum asks. No regrets, she says, watching a young girl play with a carefully preserved doll, but plenty of plans for what comes next. And when they rode out again, it was her name they whispered, Seraphine Thorne, the woman who turned abandonment into advantage, rejection into redemption, proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down when the world tries to bury you. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.